The air inside British Airways Flight 747 from Los Angeles to London was thick with expensive perfumes and the scent of leather briefcases. Businessmen were opening their laptops, wealthy couples ordering champagne. And in seat 12F sat Ozzy Osbourne, wearing a worn black t-shirt, faded jeans, and disheveled hair falling to his shoulders, staring out the window. Nobody recognized him yet, or maybe they just didn't want to, because his appearance didn't fit the business-class type these passengers were used to seeing. Ozzy had been traveling on planes for 45 years, but he still felt a slight nervousness before takeoff. Sharon would always tell him, "Ozzy, this is your 1,000th flight. You should be used to it by now." But some feelings never went away, no matter how many years passed. He leaned his head back against the seat, his eyes drifting to the aisle, and what he saw there made him freeze completely. A young flight attendant stood next to a tall, bearded man whose arms were covered in tattoos. The man was wearing a black leather vest, and on the back was a brightly embroidered emblem, Hell's Angels MC, California. He was trying to explain something politely to the attendant, but the woman's facial expression already said everything. The flight attendant's name was Victoria. In her 30s, hair pulled back in a tight bun, wearing an artificial smile. She'd been working business class for 10 years and knew the customer profile very well. Well-dressed, quiet people with expensive perfumes and polite manners. The man standing before her now painted the complete opposite profile. Bearded, tattooed, leather vest, muscular, and especially with that Hell's Angels emblem on his back. Alarm bells were ringing in Victoria's mind. The passenger showed her the business class card placed on his seat and turned to the attendant, saying in a calm voice, "No problem, this is my seat according to my ticket." But Victoria's artificial smile never changed. Victoria looked at her tablet, then back at the man. Her voice was professional but cold. "Sir, I need to check your card. There may have been an error in the system," she said. The man's name was Jack, mid-40s, from California, and he'd been a Hell's Angels member for 20 years. But contrary to what most people would think, Jack was a doctor, a trauma surgeon who worked in one of the busiest emergency rooms in Los Angeles. On weekends he rode motorcycles and spent time with his brothers, but during the week he saved lives. The business class ticket he currently held was a corporate ticket reserved for a conference invitation from the hospital. Jack pulled his ticket from his wallet and handed it to the attendant. Victoria took the ticket, examined it, then looked at her tablet again. There was a vague discomfort in her eyes. "Sir, your ticket is valid, but in business class, clothing that might cause discomfort is against our policy," she said. Jack frowned. "Clothing that might cause discomfort? You mean the leather vest?" he asked, his voice still calm, but a slight tension becoming apparent. Victoria took a step back, her voice taking on a more formal tone. "Sir, the comfort of our business class passengers is our priority. Your appearance might be disturbing to other passengers. We can arrange a much more comfortable seat for you in economy class." Ozzy was hearing everything from his seat, but he couldn't believe his ears. The real message underlying what the attendant was saying was clear. "You don't belong in this class." He saw the expression on Jack's face. It wasn't anger, it was disappointment. The expression of someone who had faced similar judgments their entire life. Scenes from Ozzy's own past came to his mind. Growing up in Birmingham's poor neighborhoods, the days he was mocked because of his stutter, the moments when Black Sabbath first went on tour and were politely labeled as troubled, all of them carried the same feeling. You don't belong here. Victoria looked around, as if expecting support from the other business-class passengers. A few people were watching curiously, but most were indifferent. A businessman glanced up from behind his newspaper, frowned, then returned to reading. A young couple was whispering between themselves. Jack took a deep breath. Instead of continuing to argue, he quietly nodded his head. "All right," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'll go to economy. It's fine." In that moment, something broke inside Ozzy. No, this was unacceptable. Over 50 years ago, he had been subjected to the same kind of treatment. And back then, no one had stood up for him. Ozzy stood up. His movement was so sudden that a middle-aged woman sitting in the opposite seat flinched. As Ozzy walked toward the aisle, his steps were slow but determined. Victoria and Jack turned to him. There was shock on the attendant's face, curiosity on Jack's. Ozzy stopped directly in front of Victoria. The sharpness of his gaze was evident from behind his glasses. His Birmingham accent had become more pronounced, as it always did. "Excuse me, love, but did I hear you correctly? You're sending this gentleman to economy because of disturbing clothing." Victoria froze for a moment. She tried to recognize the man in front of her, but with his long hair, worn t-shirt, and aged face, Ozzy looked no different to her than any ordinary elderly passenger. Maintaining her professional mask, she said, "Sir, this is airline policy. We have certain standards in business class." Ozzy smiled slightly, but the smile wasn't warm. "Your standards. I see. And what are these standards based on? Do you assume that someone wearing a leather vest is immoral, or that people with tattoos are dangerous?" The surrounding business class passengers were now completely focused on this conversation. Newspapers had been lowered, phones turned off. Everyone was wondering where this old man came from and why he was speaking so boldly. Victoria had become uncomfortable. Her voice trembled slightly. "Sir, please return to your seat. This situation doesn't concern you." Ozzy shook his head from side to side. "No, love, this absolutely concerns me. Because 30 years ago, I was judged exactly like this. Long hair, weird clothes, must be a drug addict, they said. But nobody asked who I was, what I did for a living, what I'd accomplished." Jack turned to Ozzy. There was a mixture of shock and gratitude on his face. "Sir, you really don't need to, he began, but Ozzy raised his hand to stop him. "Mate, it's absolutely necessary. Because this is your right. If you bought a business class ticket, you should sit there. Period." Then he turned to Victoria. "Now, would you explain why you're treating this gentleman this way?" The real reason. Not corporate polished phrases. Victoria's face had turned red. She could feel the stares of other passengers and cabin crew gathering around. Desperately, she said, "Sir, I just thought the other passengers might be uncomfortable." Ozzy looked around. "Which passengers?" "Show me. Who's uncomfortable?" Nobody said anything. Just silence. Ozzy continued. "See? Nobody's uncomfortable. The only person uncomfortable is you, because you judged this man by his appearance." Victoria's mouth hung open. She had no answer because what Ozzy said was completely true. She lowered her head, looked at the tablet in her hand, but couldn't find an escape route there either. Just then, a senior flight attendant approached from the front of business class. Her name was Margaret, in her 50s, grey-haired, with 25 years of experience. She looked at Victoria to understand the situation, then at Ozzy, then at Jack. Her voice was calm but authoritative. "Is there a problem here?" she asked. Ozzy turned to her, his voice softer but still firm. "Yes, love, there is a problem. This young lady wants to send this gentleman to economy because of his appearance, despite having a business class ticket." Margaret shot Victoria a sharp look. Then she turned to Jack, asked for his ticket, and examined it carefully. There were a few seconds of silence. Then Margaret said to Jack politely, "Sir, your ticket is completely valid. Please proceed to your seat." "We apologize. This was a misunderstanding." Victoria wanted to object. "But Margaret, airline policy." Margaret silenced her with a stern look. "Victoria, airline policy doesn't tell us to discriminate against passengers based on their appearance. This gentleman poses no threat. He's not doing anything against the rules. Now please return to your duties." Victoria's face had turned ashen. She walked away with her head down, but before leaving, she looked at Ozzy one more time, her eyes holding both anger and shame. Jack was still in shock. He turned to Ozzy, his voice hoarse. "Sir, thank you. You didn't need to do that, but you did. Ozzy placed his hand on Jack's shoulder. "Mate, nobody deserves to be treated like that. You belong here, I belong here, those attendants belong here, but none of us is superior to the others." Jack nodded, his eyes welling up but not crying. He just took a deep breath and said, "My name is Jack. Jack Thornton. I'm a doctor. a trauma surgeon. Because of this leather vest, people always misunderstand me. But I've been working at the hospital for 20 years. On weekends I hang out with the Hells Angels, but during the week I save lives." Ozzy smiled. "Good combination, mate." "I was misunderstood for years, too. Still am, actually." Jack asked curiously. "So what do you do? I mean, for you to speak up for me so boldly." Ozzy shrugged. "I'm in the music business, but I'm mostly retired now. Sharon and I usually hang out at our home in Los Angeles. I love being with my family now. Sometimes I do concerts, but not like I used to." Jack nodded, but didn't ask Ozzy's name. Maybe he didn't recognize him, or maybe it didn't matter. They both went to their seats, Jack to 8C, Ozzy to 12F. But the connection between them had been made. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Ozzy looked out the window at the lights of Los Angeles. There was a strange peace inside him. Maybe today he had healed a little more of that poor child soul from Birmingham 50 years ago. The flight passed quietly. Business-class passengers ate their meals, watched their movies. But whispers were circulating among them. Who was that old man? Why was he so brave? "That biker is a doctor, did you hear?" Margaret later gave Victoria a private warning. "Never ever judge a passenger by their appearance again. Next time you'll be fired." Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. The person she owed an apology to was Jack, but she didn't have the courage. The flight had been going for 6 hours when Ozzy, returning from the bathroom, passed by Jack's seat. Jack wasn't sleeping. He was reading a medical journal. Ozzy stopped. "Mate, I'm curious. Which hospital in California do you work at?" he asked. Jack looked up, smiled. "Cedars-Sinai. Emergency room and trauma department. One of the busiest places. Every weekday it's sirens, rushing around, battles for survival. But when I ride my motorcycle on weekends, I clear my head. Hell's Angels is family to me. The only community that doesn't judge me." Ozzy nodded. "I understand. I was the same way with Black Sabbath. Nobody understood me off stage. But when I got on stage, Tony, Geezer, Bill, they were my brothers." Jack was surprised. "Black Sabbath? You were in that band?" Ozzy laughed lightly. "Was in it? I was the vocalist, mate. Ozzy Osbourne." Jack's mouth fell open. His journal dropped from his hands. You're Ozzy Osbourne? Paranoid, Iron Man, War Pigs? That Ozzy Osbourne?" Ozzy nodded. "Yes, mate, that Ozzy. But now I'm just an old man. Sharon's husband, father of my children, and today, someone who stood up for you." Jack couldn't believe it. "God, how did I not recognize you? I grew up listening to Black Sabbath. I especially listened to Paranoid before difficult surgeries. It helps me focus, and you defended me today." Ozzy touched his shoulder. "Mate, I just did what was right. You do what's right every day. You save lives. I just sing songs." The two talked for a few more minutes. Ozzy spoke about Sharon, his children, the old days. Jack talked about the toughest cases at the hospital, about how Hell's Angels isn't just a motorcycle club, but actually a brotherhood. During their conversation, passengers around them listened curiously. A few wanted to take photos, but Ozzy politely declined. Right now, it's just two men talking, not celebrities. The flight still had 5 hours to go, but Ozzy felt comfortable now. When he returned to his seat, Margaret came over and said in a low voice, "Mr. Osbourne, thank you for what you did today. As cabin crew, we sometimes forget our duty. You reminded us." Ozzy smiled. "Love, we're all human. We make mistakes. What matters is learning from them." When they arrived in London, Ozzy and Jack said goodbye at the airport. Jack handed Ozzy his business card. "If you ever come to Los Angeles, call me. I'll show you around the hospital, and maybe one day we'll ride motorcycles together." Ozzy took the card, put it in his pocket. "Absolutely, mate. I'll tell Sharon your story. She'll be very impressed too." The two hugged tightly. Then they went their separate ways. But what happened that day on that plane had left its mark on both their lives. Jack would never stay silent again when judged by his appearance, and Ozzy had once again felt that he'd done something beyond music. Humanity. 3 months later, Jack gave an interview. A local news channel featured him as the Hells Angels doctor. During the interview, Jack told the plain story. One day I was humiliated in business class because of my appearance, but an old man stood up and spoke for me. That man was Ozzy Osbourne, a rock legend, but in that moment he was just a human being, someone doing what was right. The interview went viral. On social media, articles appeared with headlines like, "This is why Ozzy is a legend." But Ozzy made no comment. Sharon told him, "Darling, everyone's talking about you." "I'm proud." Ozzy just shrugged. "Sharon, I just taught a flight attendant a little lesson. That's all." Victoria quit her job within 6 months after that incident. Not because she was fired or punished, but because she began questioning herself. One day she called Jack and apologized. "Mr. Thornton, I'm so sorry for what I did to you that day. I shouldn't have judged you." Jack said kindly, "Apology accepted. But next time, give people a chance before you judge them." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She thanked him and hung up. 6 months later, Jack was on a weekend motorcycle tour with the Hells Angels again. A message came to his phone. "Mate, coming to Los Angeles. There's a concert. Would be great if you came. Ozzy." Jack smiled and immediately replied, "I'll be there." The night of the concert, the Forum was packed. Jack went backstage, and when he saw Ozzy, they hugged. "Still wearing the leather vest," Ozzy said with a grin. Jack shrugged. "Some things don't change, Ozzy. You're still wearing the same t-shirt." Sharon came over and hugged Jack. "So good to see you. Ozzy keeps telling your story." When the concert started, Ozzy said into the microphone at one point, "There's a special friend of mine here tonight. Jack, a doctor, a trauma surgeon, and a Hells Angels member. He taught you something. People aren't one-dimensional. We're all complex, we're all different. And that's a beautiful thing." The crowd applauded. Jack stood at the side of the stage, smiling. In an interview, Ozzy said, "One of the moments I'm most proud of. Making music is great, but touching someone's life is so much better." Jack and Ozzy continued to talk regularly. And so, a story that began on a plane turned into a friendship between two men. In appearance they were different, one a rock legend, the other a doctor, but in essence they were the same. Both believers in humanity, both standing against prejudice. If this story reminded you of something, it should be this: appearances are deceiving. A doctor can wear a leather vest, a legend can wear a worn t-shirt, and sometimes the right thing is to stand up and speak, because silence approves of wrong. Ozzy Osbourne knew this, Jack Thornton learned it, and now you know it too. The story that began on that plane wasn't just about two men meeting, it was a stand against prejudice, and that stand still echoes today.